You know, this study was completed on April 24th, and keynote, it's plus or minus 30% of actual cost, so this is all level 3 estimates. And what the study came up to is that the cost to underground this transmission is approximately 4 to 5 times the cost of overhead transmission. So, like I said, we studied several segments. Segment 2 is the Northfield segment of the line. And, you know, that's about 3 miles, and it's 4 times more expensive. So, what was going to cost the utilities $3 million going underground, it's going to cost $13 million. These are rough rounded numbers just so I can talk easily. The study's online if anybody wants to read it. Segment 4, power plant to the fish hatchery, so down through the fields, past the sewer plant. You know, also very expensive segment to do underground at 4 times as much. Segment 6, around the fish hatchery, another mile line, that ended up being 5 to 1. So, you know, just based on boring, trenching, that type of stuff made these certain segments a little bit more money. Segment 8, Center Street to the Midway substation. So this is the road from Midway to Charleston up to the Midway substation, which is above the Midway Cemetery. About a mile of line, $6 million. And the ratio ended up being 5 to 1, so there's probably some decimal points missing from some of these. But like I say, the study's online. You can take a look at it. If we were to do the whole line from Highway 40 to Midway, we're looking at $8 million to do it overhead, $34 million to do it underground, at about 4 times the amount of money.
Quick question, are there 2 trenches if it's buried, or just 1?
There would be 1 trench.
Separate trench.
Yeah, so we would dig it all in 1 trench, you know, but there would be 2 different conduit banks. So the conduit banks would also have to be cast in concrete as well. And, you know, burying this type of energy requires a lot more than it does than just your typical edge home development, for sure. So,
how deep is the burial?
I'm going off of memory here, but I want to say that we're looking at about a 3-foot bank of conduits minimum, and we'd probably have a good overdig of a foot, 1.5 feet. So we're looking at probably, and then we need 3 to 4 feet of coverage. So it's a significant trench to dig. So. So now we get into siting. I mean, that's just the bad news on underground. I mean, you know, there's a lot of good with it, but the bad news is that it just costs more. So this is the current siting. And you can see Rocky Mountain Power has a 138 kV line at the Jordanelle Access Road. And so there's about a mile of line that needs to be built that hasn't been built from the College Access Road up to the Jordanelle Access Road. And then leaving from where the big pole is on Highway 40, just above Smith's, coming out through the fields, following the bypass corridor, and then coming into the gas plant substation. That's where we are currently proposing the point of delivery. Then going up 650 South in Heber, across the river, heading west. The Provo River substation, that tie line needs to be rebuilt. That would be rebuilt with the project. And then continuing west on our South 46 kV lines corridor over to the Midway substation. So from Midway substation to gas plant substation, we are pretty much looking at pole-for-pole replacement of our 46 kV line that's currently built there. And it's just a quick slide of the history. So you can see, it all started in 2012. We got a couple of conditional use permits along the way, built 2 miles of line in Wasatch County, down Highway 40. We're beginning to get all of the kind of bulk electric approvals in place for the new point of delivery substation. And we're looking to hopefully complete and finalize all of this by 2021, prior to us running into some issues while we're on peak with your power needs. So we got a tight timeline. Really can't afford too many more delays, and that's kind of where we're at. Hopefully I covered everything that the board has reviewed and tasked me with informing you on. Are we ready for questions? Yeah.
Jason, go back to the slide that shows the comparative costs.
Okay.
You need to understand that $8 million overhead, Rocky Mountain Power is paying 80% of that cost. The $34 million underground, they'll pay 80% of the above ground cost, which is around $6.4 million. The rest of that's our ratepayers. They're not paying for the underground. They'll pay for the overground at 80%.
Question. On those segments, which has the most residential impact with overhead lines?
Of these segments, most residential impact, I'm guessing, is going to be right down 650 South in Heber, and probably Stringtown Road, Ward Lane in Midway.
Is that where that goes from Stringtown up to the power station? That's right to residential.
What?
What lane in Midway? Is Midway Station the end of the line?
The end of Heber Lane Power's line is in the Midway substation, yes.
Okay, so then there's nothing south? No line running south of there?
It runs south out of Midway substation to Ward Lane.
And where's Ward Lane? How far south of Ward Lane?
Just south of the cemetery.
900 south.
900 south in Midway.
So it's going right by Appleton, That's 900 south.
Stringtown.
Streeter Lane?
970 to be exact.
970.
970, so it's just a little bit south of Appleton. 970
So
ends up on the road.
I have quite a few questions, some things that I've never really understood in this whole process, so can I ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
Sure. I'm Chris Bernard. I live in Midway, and I've listened to this story go on for... Go over there and go. So this is more so that I understand. Cool. So anyway, Chris Bernard from Midway. Some of the things I have never really understood. First of all, a question. Right now, our power basically comes from the line over the hill into correct, on the 138,000 volt line?
No, currently our line, our main feed, 138 kV feed, runs from Hale substation at the mouth of Provo Canyon, up Provo Canyon to the Midway substation.
Yeah, that's what I meant, sorry. So from the Midway substation, you then feed the entire valley with a 46,000 volt, two 46,000 volt lines, correct? Okay. So, Light Power have built this line coming into town on 40, correct?
Yes.
How many power lines are on there? Aren't there 238,000 and one 46,000 volt line?
No, coming down 40, there's a line built on one side that is built to 138 specs. And then the other line is a 46 kV line built to 138 kV specs. I think it's important to know that once this utility hits about 75 megawatts, we're at 42 right now, we will start to study of taking our sub-transmission to 138,000 volts. Because we're going to need 138,000 volts before we hit 100 megawatts. And we're nearing halfway there. And, you know, overall, long-term projections for population and everything else in this valley, we will get above 100 megawatts. So we're building everything today on our transmission to 138 spec.
So what you're saying is we'll need the 138 feet in here as well. Okay. So that was one of my concerns. I never really kind of understood that. But for the time being, you have been providing power across the valley with the 46. But at some stage, you're going to have to connect both the transmission line, the 46,000 volt lines will have to be replaced with 138,000 volt lines.
Yeah, we changed that spec back in 2002. And so our north line is built to 138,000 spec. And we will rebuild the south line to 138,000 spec, whether we were with Rocky Mountain Power or not. The Rocky Mountain Power component literally is more along the lines of their system, saying for a new point of delivery, for the amount that you will end up growing into, and for today, we've got to tie those lines together. Meaning we've got to have redundant feeds. We can't have 138 on one end of the valley and 138 on the other end of the valley and expect a 46 kV system to transmit properly. It doesn't work that way. We've got to have that north line tied to the south line on their system, and then our sub-transmission takes it from there to our substations throughout our service territory.
That's what I needed to understand. I have a list of questions here. Okay, so a couple of the things. The last board meeting I went to, you were discussing getting a $15 million bond. What is that money? That's for construction, all right? What's that for?
Yeah. So, you know, we're still, like I say, until we get permits and everything else, we're running off of level 3 estimates. So right now we have a level 3 estimate for our portion of the point of delivery substation that is in the $10 million range. So that's included in that number. And then we have some other concerns as far as just other needs of the utility that bring it to that 5 million range. But that would all depend on the board and whether those needs come to light by the time we go to that financing. We really can't hammer down on hard estimates and get hard bids until we get permitting. So right now we're in this state of working off of level 3 estimates, which say the point of delivery substation is going to cost Heber Light and Power about $10 million, plus or minus 30%. So that's just where we're at. And that's where the 15 million comes from. The rest of this line is also a portion of that. And if it goes overhead, then that's another, 2 to 3 million.
So, just a couple other points. Park City gets part of its power out of the Midway substation, correct? There's a line to Park City.
Yeah, there's a 46 kV line. So we go to that map. There's a 46 kV line. Park City's a lot like us. They're a 46 kV system, just like Heber is a 46 kV system currently. And but I don't know how.
Is it that line there? Is that?
Yeah, so the line heading north, the blue line, is the line that heads over towards Park City out of the Midway substation as well, yep. Rocky Mountain Power is here too, Ben, if you want to come up and help me with the questions on your system. I don't really like talking about it.
So that's not Heber Light and Power. There's two substations out there.
Right. Up above the cemetery, there's a Heber Light and Power substation, and there's a Rocky Mountain Power substation. Yep.
So then, is it possible that if we have to bury or partly bury the line in the valley, that we could pass some of that expense on to Park City, since they will be getting power from this line as well?
I'm not sure Park City requested this point of delivery. I don't know where that's coming from.
They're getting the power as it is, so if we connect...
Well, we're all an interconnected grid, so should we pay for everything that's happening in Castledale because of the Hunter plant that's down there that we get 5 megawatts from?
No, I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, so on the map that you see, on the top part of the map on the left-hand side, there's a 46 kV line that goes from Midway up to Judge Substation, then over to Park City, and then back to Silver Creek Substation by Quinn's Junction. Silver Creek Substation, so if you look at the blue line right below the reservoir there that heads to the north, that line goes up to Silver Creek Substation as well. There's a 138 kV line that goes from Evanston, Wyoming, down into Silver Creek. There's another 138 kV line that goes up and over from Salt Lake and goes into Silver Creek Substation. So that 46 kV line actually feeds, theoretically it could feed from Evanston, Wyoming, from Salt Lake, or from Utah County at various generation sources.
Good. So, a couple of things that just jumped out during your conversation. The right-of-way, no one can really construct anything anywhere near the right-of-ways, right? Does it matter whether it's under the ground or above the ground? You mentioned that it was more strict if it was below the ground, but no one can do any construction or anything in any of the right-of-ways.
No, I mean, clearly, like through pasture ground, things like that, people can still farm around an underground line. They can still plow their field. They can still, they just can't get around our structures. We do limit trees and various other things that can get up into the lines on an overhead line. But yeah, the right-of-ways are similar. The land use is just different between an underground right-of-way and an overhead right-of-way.
So, Rocky Mountain Power are paying 80% of the above-ground transmission line, correct? Which is about, at that estimate, about $6.4 million or something around that range. So they would contribute, if the line was buried or partially buried, they would contribute that money to the project as a whole, correct? So then, depending on, the numbers are not up there, so it was 30, how many million? 34 million or something. So if the whole thing was buried, even Light and Power would have to come up with 28 million, 27.5 million, somewhere in that range, correct? And then it doesn't have to all be buried or partially buried, so that number would come down. So you also mentioned that, and these are just things that jumped out, the peak usage is during the summer months, correct, with the power?
We're really weather dependent. The last few years, it's definitely been summer, but I think I can go back, there's been a year, a few years back that we did peak in the winter. Clearly, we peak on the 10 coldest days of the year and the 10 hottest days of the year. That's our peak. We're on peak then, and that's what I would estimate either during the middle of the winter on a 10, during the 10 coldest days. That's when, the transmission system is, and really all of our system is on peak, and the 10 hottest days we're on peak.
I've heard you talk about this before, but the use of solar power and solar power battery systems to back up.
Excuse me. Does anybody else want to get to talk?
Yeah, I'm going to shush in about 2 minutes.
Well, no. You've had your time as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, right.
One
One more question. The solar power, you're doing everything you can to promote the use of solar power. Do you think it helps? And then I'm sitting down.
I've been thinking all the time.
Do you have
I've got a question, Jason. Have you figured out the cost of the easements?
We've got a rough estimate of what the easements are going to cost.
And from whom did you get the estimate?
From all of my information on easement purchasing has come from Rocky Mountain Power that does it all over.
Have you had a real estate appraiser come in and establish what it's going to cost for these easements through the whole line, assuming that I'm not certain that you have easements over the property that you now have lines. You can't, in my view, go from one easement and increase the size of it to something else.
We agree with that. We have a 46 kV prescriptive right is all we have.
Okay. So have you gotten any experts involved to determine what it would cost for these easements? Because an underground easement, you can have your underground easement across my place for practically nothing. You put up a large pole, I'm going to want more.
Yeah.
And I would dare say most of the people feel the same way. So what you have to do is take your underground cost, you can't compare that to overhead costs, because with underground costs, with overhead costs, you've got an added cost of these easements. And you sit there and you say, this is pasture land.
It's not. I'm not saying it is.
Well, you did mention that somebody could farm.
The easements that Heber Light and Power would be needing to get, meaning we have a 46 kV prescriptive right on our south 46 kV line.
Okay. And
the rest of the easement the purchase of that would be on Rocky Mountain Power.
about how much?
No, the rest of the purchase of that easement, whatever the easement needs to be bettered, would have to be on Rocky Mountain Power.
Is that not included in?
We're going to save that money if we do the underground easement.
So what you save from the easement, you can use to build underground.
We're going to save money by doing the underground.
I don't know if we're going to save money, but the cost will not be the numbers that you put up here.
The cost for that is purely an overhead, what it costs to construct an overhead line versus construct an underground line.
But Jason, that's not the total cost.
That's right.
We realize that.
And how much are we budgeting for that, and where did you get your numbers?
Where did we get our numbers? We're budgeting for easements.
easements.
And what is your number, Jason?
I don't know, Ben, do you want to talk about that?
Doesn't Rocky Mountain Power pay an easement for above ground, and that's part of the 80% of the total cost, including the easement? Is that true? Of the power, the poles. If your cost, if you're going to pay 80% of the above ground cost, would the easement for the above ground structure be part of that?
No.
There's, easements are specifically dealt with separately from the facilities being the structure and the wires and insulators at separate rates. In some cases, Rocky Mountain Power needs to pay 100% if Heat Light Power has prescriptive rights. Other areas, like through the Northfields, there are no existing rights, and so there's a different cost split. Both entities need to have whatever rights are necessary. I believe your specific question is...
My specific question is this: how much have you budgeted for easements? And where did you get your information? Two questions, very simple. Give me a number. Is it $1 million, $2 million, $5 million?
It's in the 1 to 2 range, but I can't say off the top of my head exactly what it is. I don't have that with me. And there was, and just, it wasn't a parcel by parcel, because I understand where you're going, and that definitely needs to happen. We wanted to get the permits done and then acquire all the property.
Okay. So when you throw this slide up here telling us the cost of burying it and the cost of going overhead, why is it that you did not put in the cost of the easements when you put this slide up for us?
I totally agree. Yeah, that you can't make a real comparison like that.
And the cost factor is out there.
Why can't we get a real estate appraiser to come in and talk about what the easements are going to cost?
I don't
Mutually
care about
agreed upon.
I care about my utility bill. I'm going to presume that when you figure all this out, easements, comparative easements, all costs, that you can then tell me, to include how you're going to use impact fees, what the net effect is going to be on my heater, light, and power electric bill each month. That's really all I care about.
From a high level, what was looked at is what, say, residential property was going for at the time when this study was done, as well as agricultural property. And so there was a real high level, like Jason was saying, like a level 3, like a 30%-ish, based on, you know, what property was selling for at the moment and historical. That's the level that we've done. But quite frankly,
What year was that? What year was that?
Last year, 2017. So I think from a larger perspective, it's in the $1 to $2 million range, and it wasn't producing a big enough swing. As you can see, we're talking about 28 million. There's not enough there. And also, in portions, Heaver Light Power does bear half the cost. So I think that's probably the best explanation.
What's the size of a 48 kV easement and the size of the larger easement? 138.
If we were to acquire new easements today for a 46 kV line, we'd get a 30-foot offset easement, so 60-foot. Excuse me, 25-foot offset easement, so a 50-foot. And for a 138 kV line, it'd be a 30-foot offset, so 60 feet.